It's been a busy weekend as the Liberal Party wrapped up its national convention in Ottawa over the weekend. The federal government, though, still facing questions around foreign interference and growing political pressure to expel a Chinese diplomat from Canada. I asked the Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly about her government's handling of this case involving Conservative MP Michael Chong. Minister Joly, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Rosie.
I want to start, obviously, with these latest allegations about this Chinese diplomat working in China, apparently charged with targeting Michael Chong and his family overseas. I know you and Mr. Chong went back and forth a few times this week at committee, and his request is that the diplomat in question be expelled from Canada. What would you say is the likelihood of that happening at this point, Minister?
Well, first and foremost, and I've said that directly to my colleague and friend, MP Chong, that I can only imagine the pain, the suffering, the angst, the frustration, just thinking that your family and yourself is being targeted by the PRC, which is completely unacceptable. And as I mentioned many times, first and foremost, we will never accept any form of foreign interference, any form of meddling in our democracy. And I've said that to my Chinese counterpart as well. So that's why I instructed my deputy minister last week to summon the Chinese ambassador, and also that's why I've said that all options are on the table, including the expulsion of a diplomat.
You talked at that committee, too, about some of the consequences of this kind of action. So I wouldn't mind you sort of explaining more what you're worried about there and how you come to this kind of decision.
Well, first and foremost, the protection of our democracy is important. It's at the bedrock of our prosperity and obviously of Canadian safety. So that's why I take this decision extremely seriously. But at the same time, what we've learned from to Michael's experience is that there will be a consequence to our decision. And these consequences can range from different types of interests, definitely diplomatic interests, but also economic interests and potentially consular interests. That means Canadians themselves being in China. So that's why we are right now in the midst of evaluating what could be these interests, what could be the consequences. And at the same time, this is about definitely, like I said to MP Chong, it's about him, but it's also about the interests of the country. And as foreign minister, I need to make sure that it is the right decision, and it will be the right decision.
China's embassy in a statement said that Canada has responded, Canada's response rather, is the start of going down a wrong and dangerous path, and that if Canada continues to provoke China, this was from their statement, it will follow through to the end. How do you respond to that kind of threat? Because that's what it is, really.
As I said, we will never accept any form of interference in our democracy, in our internal affairs, period. That's how we make sure that we can continue to have Canadians trusting our institutions, but also that we can protect Canadians, and particularly the Chinese Canadian diaspora, which can be the target of the PRC. And so basically my point is that there will be a decision that will be well evaluated, and as I mentioned a bit earlier, all options are on the table. The Prime Minister and I are working on this actively.
How concerned are you that this intelligence didn't get to the Prime Minister or apparently the Public Safety Minister? That, some of Marco Mendocino, for instance, your colleague, has said that that's not acceptable, and he is concerned about that. How concerned are you that that kind of level of intelligence is not being flagged up?
Well, it's a problem, Rosie. And that's why the Prime Minister has asked for an investigation to make sure that, of course, people, potentially MPs that would be a target, be informed, first and foremost, and second, that the government be informed, because it is an issue when you have MPs doing their work, representing their riding, taking decisions for the people that they represent, are the target of a foreign actor and a foreign state. And we know that right now this is an issue, but we know also that the question of disinformation, particularly online and targeting different communities across the country, is an issue. And we're not the only democracy dealing with this. We are open systems, and that's definitely something that European democracies, clearly the US as well, and other democracies around the world are dealing with. And as foreign ministers, also what I'm doing is seeking advice and looking at best practices around the world.
I want to ask you a couple questions about Sudan, if I can. You were just back from Kenya. You were meeting with Canadian officials and others, politicians in Kenya. More than 400 Canadians were able to get out of the country. Now things obviously have taken a turn, and it's much more dangerous. What about the Canadians who are still in need of support there, or who may change their mind in the coming weeks and decide, I don't want to be here anymore?
Well, we will always continue to offer consular services. It's important that we do, because that's what Canadians expect us to do. But at the same time, this is one of the most dangerous places in the world. And it's not only me saying this, it's actually Antonio Guterres, which is the UN Secretary General. I can only thank the Canadian Armed Forces who've been working at this for the past 2 weeks. I had the chance also to be in Kenya a couple of days ago to meet with Canadians and their families that had been evacuated. And we can only, how can I say, relate to their fear, their pain, because they've gone through hell to get out of Sudan. And we will be there to help the Sudanese people themselves by providing humanitarian aid. But I want to make sure also that Canada stands up and shows up when in times of crisis, particularly when this crisis is happening in Africa. And that's why I was there in Kenya working with the Kenyan government to find also diplomatic solutions and give a voice to the Sudanese people themselves.
One more political question, because you were the person who introduced the Prime Minister for his keynote at the speech. Well, you did a keynote as well, but it included an introduction for the Prime Minister. And I wanted to ask you a question about part of his speech, where he talked about Pierre Poilievre, and he told him to, quote, wake up. He really directly confronted conservative criticism that the government, your government, is too woke. Why do you think it is important for the Prime Minister to put so much focus on that? What is the idea behind that political strategy, if you will?
Well, first and foremost, the convention right now is really a success. There's 3,000 Liberals in town in Ottawa. The energy is high. But I would say also that more than ever, the choice is stark, and also, the stakes are extremely high. Why? Because what we're seeing is the fact that the far right has reached our shores. We're seeing it in the rest in the US. We're seeing it here. And what the Prime Minister is saying basically is you have a choice between having access to opportunities, making sure that we can continue to work on the issues linked to climate change, that we can be there to support women, LGBTQ people, opportunities across the country. And meanwhile, what Poilievre is doing, he's really trying to eat Maxime Bernier's lunch by really catering to this far-right movement with climate change deniers, with anti-women, anti-abortion people, and also conspiracy theorists. So all that to say, it was important for the Prime Minister to be clear in terms of what Canadians are facing. I think it's important that we be transparent, but at the same time that we are there working every day to make sure that we continue to serve Canadians. And we know that we've won 3 elections. We know that we've been a government for 8 years. But I think what you're seeing at the convention is that the motivation of the troops are extremely high, and that we're getting very well organized.
Minister Joly, thank you for making the time. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.